Very good. We'd like to welcome everyone to today's presentation of the E-Rotary Coastal Club. It is Thursday, August 31st, 2017, and we are so glad that you've joined us. If you have an opportunity, if you're on the computer, you want to call in, the number is given to you on the screen right there with the ID, login ID to get you onto the call, or you can log in directly from your computer. Let me go ahead and start with a few brief announcements, and then we'll go to our normal introduction. But I do want to say that initially we don't normally start this meeting with prayer. We normally start with the pledge and the four-way test, but today I think it's appropriate that we lift up the people that are in Texas and the western Louisiana coast who've been impacted dramatically by Hurricane Harvey. Category 4 hurricane slammed into Rockport, Texas, and sat there for a few days. And as a result, we have a lot of our coastal community members, Rotarians and non-Rotarians alike, who are many probably still could be even still in their houses, in their homes, because the flooding has not stopped. It's continued to increase in some areas. Beaumont and Port Arthur, especially right now, are under some duress conditions. So let me just pray, and then we'll continue with our meeting. Lord, we just thank you for this day. Thank you for the sunshine that we have here in Baton Rouge, where I'm sitting, and other places in our state. I lift up those who are still in harm's way for the downgraded tropical storm Harvey, which is moving through North Louisiana and into Arkansas, and then following that into Tennessee. That those who are in the current path, Lord, that you to watch out for them. Be with those people in Houston, Rockport, Beaumont, Port Arthur, Lake Charles, Shreveport, Manny, Louisiana. Lord, as they've been inundated with wind and water. Lord, help those who are currently in their homes and have been unable to escape or find help. To allow them to have help directed their way, provide them food and water and clothing. That this is truly a historic event with just the number of people that are involved. The rebuilding is going to take quite a while, Lord, and so we just pray that you would provide favor, both with the government programs and funding as well as private monies that are going into the area. Lord, in these times, people need help, and so we just ask that you would direct those who have that upon their hearts to go to Houston and to go to the surrounding areas and to give assistance. And may we as Rotarians provide assistance as we can through our local Rotary clubs as well as through E-Rotary Coastal. And I pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, with that, we'll go ahead and get our club meeting started. We normally start with a Pledge of Allegiance, and this is a tradition within all American Rotary clubs. And so I'll say the Pledge of Allegiance, and we'll go from there. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And next we have the four-way test, which again, from a Rotary perspective, this is what all Rotarians carry with them at all times in their heart, in their mind. It's the things we think, say, or do. Is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned? That's the Rotarian four-way test. It's what guides us as a E-Rotary Coastal Club, as well as Rotarians around the world. If you're not familiar, Rotary International is, I think it's 1.225 million people now with 32,000 plus clubs around the world. There's not a major metropolitan area or even a small metropolitan area that you can go to without being able to find a Rotary club. So please, when you're in an area, look for the Rotary wheel and attend a meeting. It's a great opportunity to meet other Rotarians. If you're not a Rotarian, it's a great way to meet a Rotarian and to get involved in what we do. We'd love to have you join us as an organization and be assisting with us. Today, I'd like to go ahead and introduce before I introduce our guests, let me do a little club business very quickly. We're in the process of still trying to get our corporation name established so we can start a corporation and get our bank account set up, and then we can start collecting our dues, which should be coming within the next 2 or 3 weeks. So please bear with us as we do that. All right. Today I'd like to introduce to you Clint Willson. And Dr. Clint Willson, he's the Mike M. Dooley, PE Professor of Civil and Environmental Engineering at LSU. Well, for the past 19 years, he's been teaching and conducting research primarily in water resources and environmental engineering. Clint obtained his BS in Aerospace Engineering from Penn State and then was commissioned officer in the U.S. Marine Corps. After serving almost 7 years, Clint enrolled at the University of Texas at Austin, where he earned an MS in Environmental Engineering and a PhD in Civil Engineering. Prior to coming to LSU, he spent 2 years as a postdoctoral research associate at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. And over the past several years, Clint has served as the Director of Engineering Design and Innovation Program at the Water Institute of the Gulf, President of the American Society of Civil Engineers, Baton Rouge branch, and is the chair of the Changing Course Technical Team. He's currently director of the CIPRA-funded LSU Center for River Studies, a new research and education facility that is located on the Baton Rouge Water Campus. So with that, Dr. Willson, I'll let you take it away from there. And I understand y'all actually had a tour there, I guess, a couple of weeks ago that was limited to 40 people. I had signed up for it, but I was a little bit too late. So I'm anxious to get over there and see the facility at the water campus.
Great. No, thank you so much, Bob. I appreciate that. And I appreciate the opportunity. Hopefully everyone can see my title slide now. Please holler at me or type if you can't see it or you have problems hearing me. But again, I appreciate this opportunity to talk a little bit about what we're doing here at LSU in terms of kind of coastal river and ecological engineering. What I'd like to do is go through a little bit about this master's program that we have in coastal and ecological engineering. I've got some colleagues to send me, because I guess I need to allow people now that I have control. Okay. So I've got some slides from some colleagues. Bear with me as we go through them. If they're the formatting or some of the styles changed, I didn't want to spend a significant amount of time trying to get everything consistent over the course of this PowerPoint. So you'll see some styles change as we go through, but hopefully you'll get a sense of what some different faculty are doing and in terms of the coastal ecological and river engineering. And what I really hope you get from this is how we're at LSU we think we're really educating students and kind of the current generation of coastal ecological water resources engineers. And at the why did he just I screwed something up, I think. What happened there? Okay. Thanks, Carl.
You're good.
Give it back to me.
Back.
Yeah. I think I went too fast. There we go. Okay. So hopefully you get a sense of some of the work that we're doing here in, like I said, educating kind of the current and next generation of our coastal and ecological water resources students, as well as the research and really translating basic research into, applied research and design. So I'm going to go through some work that Scott Hagan and actually there's some people that helped me get the slides together here. Scott Hagan and then Jim Chen, and then I borrowed some slides that Rudy Simino and I have put together over the last couple of years in terms of the Center for River Studies. So with that, I want to talk about this new degree program, and I'm going to start here. It officially began in 2012 and really came about at the request or push of, probably even back then, Department of Natural Resources, the Coastal Engineering Group with Chris Knotts, the Corps of Engineers, New Orleans District, and really even consultants in the area seeing a need for, the training of at least master's level students at this interface between kind of coastal and ecological engineering. And so I would say, we're really here to provide graduate level education tool and really research skills to tackle those tough problems that are at that interface. So, it's the only really master MS program. I know there are some concentrations around, and I know LSU has some certificate programs, but this is a true Master of Science program, and really a unique program. I'm going to get to in a few slides about, I think, number one, how it fits in and where our students are going, but also kind of the need that we filled. So, just to give you a quick background on what the curriculum requires or involves, every student has to take a class in coastal engineering as well as ecological engineering, and that ecological engineering class is co-taught between faculty in our civil engineering department, civil environmental engineering department, and the Department of Oceanography and Coastal Sciences. So when you see docs up there, that's the Oceanography and Coastal Science. So those two classes, and then we've got a math class that's required, as well as then a capstone graduate level coastal and ecological design course that really requires the students to, integrate and kind of the coastal and ecological design features and impacts of a project. And then, of course, we also require the students to take at a minimum at least one class in oceanography and coastal sciences. Most students take multiple, and those courses can range from wetlands biogeochemistry and estuarine ecology, estuarine dynamics, deltaic geology. We've got a number of courses, and I think really a strength at LSU is that we've got such a strong physical sciences group, between the Department of Oceanography, Coastal Science, I think the Department of Geology, Geophysics, as well as Geography and Anthropology. So the students really have an opportunity to take some classes that help them understand, we teach them the engineering principles and the kind of fundamentals of engineering, but what these physical science classes really help them see are the dynamics of the natural processes and how that, in one sense complicates the design, but also help them, think about how they're going to incorporate these natural processes into the design. Then, as I said, the elective course allows them to focus. They can focus kind of more towards the coastal hard, maybe structures part of it, or the ecosystems wetland side. Right now, it's currently only a thesis degree program, so students have to have at least one committee member from, I should say docs, from the Department of Oceanography and Coastal Science. So it really is an integrated program. It's run out of civil environmental engineering, but it's closely tied in and actually co-run with the Department of Oceanography and Coastal Science. The applicant pool. So this is something where we hoped it would fill a niche and serve a need, but what's really neat about this is the diverse pool of applicants we've been getting. And when I say diverse, I don't mean just necessarily gender, although 40% of our applicants have been female. About 45% of the applicants over the past, I guess it's been, probably half a dozen years or more, have been from United States schools, but not LSU. And so we've had students from, the Northeast, from the Midwest, and now, the Pacific Northwest, the West Coast, apply and come to the program. I think because we fill this niche or this really interesting area between the kind of the coastal processes. Obviously, a lot of people were interested in the coast. So many of our people live, in not just in the country, but around the world in coastal regions, but also so tying in the coastal processes and engineering to the ecosystems and the habitats and the fisheries, et cetera. The other thing that's really been interesting has been the applicant pool in terms of the quality. I mean, it's just almost off the charts in terms of the quality of the students that we're getting applied to our program. As of last May, we've had eight graduates so far. We have, I think, at least one or two working for CPRA, one down at the Corps of Engineers New Orleans District. We've got some working in consulting firms in the state and around the country, as well as we've got several that are continuing on to grad school. And we currently have about 12 students. The limiting factor, honestly, right now is our ability to fund graduate students. For those of you who went to graduate school and understand the crucial aspect of a graduate assistantship or teaching assistant, probably understand that that right now is really our limiting factor as far as the number of students we can have in the program. So I think the other thing I want to add to this, and actually let me back up for a second. So the only other thing I want to add, and I don't have a slide on this, is also the number of students that have come out of not just the Department of Civil Engineering, the master's or PhD in civil engineering, but I noticed Tyler Ortega, for example, is on this call. And I think the College of Engineering as a whole has produced some students that we would probably say, probably are coastal and ecologically engineering trained at LSU or educated at LSU. So we're really excited about the students that have, went through the program prior to the official degree, as well as those that we're producing. So what I want to do now is I'm going to transition to kind of three parts here, or three pieces. And the first part is going to be from Professor Scott Hagan, who is a relatively recent hire here at LSU, about 2 years, I guess about 2.5 years ago. He came to us from the University of Central Florida. And Scott is an AdCirc, being the most common kind of storm surge. Actually started as a coastal circulation model, but it's really kind of known by most people as the kind of state-of-the-art, state-of-the-practice storm surge model. So Scott's been here about 2.5 years, and I want to talk a little bit about his Center for Coastal Resiliency, and really what Scott's been able to do in terms of linking kind of the coastal processes to land use, land change, kind of land cover, to ecological impacts as well as risk. And what he's doing, and he's able to do that while at the same time maintaining, really a world-class reputation in terms of the details of how do you mesh, how do you create a finite element mesh that really captures gets to the granularity you need for some of these processes or to do these studies. And Scott's already developed a nice set of students, postdocs, as well as collaborators and funding sources. So, I won't read through all of this, but I think I kind of went through most of this already. But, Scott came to us from the University of Central Florida and already done a good bit of work in the northern Gulf Coast, particularly the Pensacola or the Florida Panhandle and over into Mississippi and Alabama, and really has used the opportunity that he was afforded coming here to LSU to expand that kind of region that he's really been working on. And so you can see there, he's really working on not just the advancement of the computational hydrodynamic and hydraulic models, but he's really also using these to assess impacts of, sea level rise, the natural and human systems, and impact kind of that, or look at that interface in these coastal zones. So it's really been a great hire, I think, by the department, LSU, and I think valuable to the state. So just a couple slides that Scott put together, and I know they're kind of busy, but we don't want to go through these in extreme detail, and I probably can't do justice to a lot of what he's provided us here. But what Scott's really got good at and spent a lot of time honing his expertise is on this, developing the mesh, and you kind of see in the bottom left-hand corner this finite element mesh there. But what's important there is how do you create the mesh? How do you refine the mesh so that you really capture the topography, the bathymetry topography, and also in the anthropogenic features. And so Scott spent a lot of time in really understanding how you take those digital elevation models and you create a high quality finite element mesh that can be used. And then what he's also doing is using those meshes to then link, the coastal processes and with inland flooding. And so one of the things on the left-hand side there that you see is this idea of, it's a little bit hard to see, but he kind of has these zones where you have the coastal or storm surge, the risk that you have from a storm surge, but on the flip side, of the upland side, you transition more into an inland, hydrologic unit that, as we've seen over the, particularly in the Amite River last August, and we've seen, most recently here in Houston, you have a lot of inland flooding, and really where they meet in that really commingling of the river flooding or the distributary flooding that's occurring, and where it meets the coastal region is something that Scott's really interested in, and something we're actually collaborating on. The way we can talk about later if possible, if necessary. So Scott, because of the computational, demands of these large storm surge models, really generating a high quality mesh, but making sure it's computationally efficient is something he's really worked a lot on. And what you can see a little bit is kind of on the left-hand side there, that large scale region, right, of being able to do, AdCirc models that take into account the coastal processes and the formation and development of a hurricane and storm surge to then, to the kind of the upper right or that middle to upper right, looking at the details of the floodplain and how land use, land changes, into the future, will impact the storm surge risk. And again, here, just kind of highlighting a couple things that I've already talked about, this idea of these digital elevation models, the LiDAR point cloud, and forest, for example, the upper left is kind of a random forest model that if you see a transition from one type of land use, land cover to another, how do you incorporate that into a mesh that captures the details so you can make design level decisions or emergency preparedness decisions. The bottom right there, you see, making sure that you actually capture, features such as roads or, different ridges and making sure that those are there. And Scott has a lot of examples of, where if you don't appropriately capture those features, what impact it has on inundation depths and timings. And the other part of this is what, Scott will talk about it in terms of a system of systems, right? And that, you have these, field and measurements, you've got the global climate change scenarios, then you've got these integrated models, you've got to have, wind, tides, overland flow, coastal erosion, the ecosystem. And what you see there kind of in the movie there, and again, in the middle to the right side there is, changes in land use, land cover, and I think it's the USGS has projections of those over into the next 25 or 50 years. And so, Scott and his group have looked at, how sea level rise is going to impact coastal flooding as not just, you might get sea level rise, but also how land use, land cover, the landscape changes, particularly in these low gradient zones. He's also done a good bit of work with people like Jim Morris at South Carolina to look at the habitat, the changes in the ecosystem. So you get a transition, as the marsh types change with sea level rise or inundation, you get changes in the ecosystem or the type of plants you get, and he's able to incorporate those and see what the impact would be. And then finally, I think this might be the last slide for Scott, but it's this idea of assessment of natural and nature-based features, and you're going to see this again when I talk a little bit about what Jim Chen's doing, but the idea of, and this, what Scott's pointing out here is you've got these ecosystem service valuation, but at the same time, different types of natural or nature and natural-based features. You also then have, the coastal processes that are, that are having a huge impact. And so Scott does a lot of work on looking at the trade-offs between the ecosystem services. So you can see kind of this middle box here that I'm kind of circling here, is that you have the ecosystem services, and then you've also got, the inundation, and you're looking at trade-offs between those. And at the end here on the right-hand side, it's a little bit covered up, but you see, this idea of providing information to policymakers in terms of the benefits, right? The benefits of this natural and nature-based features. So again, we're trying to take this, the computational science and our understanding of the coastal processes and the ecosystem services, the land use, land change, but really developing tools and hopefully improving our understanding so we can incorporate these features into our designs and or our evaluations of for future planning or management strategies. And then Scott's been heavily funded through NOAA, the National Science Foundation, I don't think it's on here, but I know the Center for Excellence through some of the oil spill finds that he's gotten some funding from them. And he's also a faculty member here in our Center for Computation and Technology. So being able to utilize those resources. So the next thing I want to do is I want to jump to what Dr. Jim Chen. So Jim's been here probably, I think since about 2007. So he's been here about 10 years, probably our first true coastal hire. And after Joe Saheda retired. So Jim's developed a really nice, really strong research group that, that really has led to, I think, some really neat work, and also, been able to teach some, undergraduate and graduate level classes in coastal engineering that were greatly needed here. So, Jim's developed a strong program of students and research and postdocs, as well as he's gotten some really nice funding from the National Science Foundation. 3 of them are shown here. And what I want to just point out here in terms of particularly the cyber and coastal seas are these major efforts that the National Science Foundation has done to really put together, interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary teams. And the cyber seas really is linking kind of computer science to coastal engineering and coastal modeling, while the coastal seas is really linking kind of the social sciences to our coastal the social sciences, our coastal science and coastal engineering in terms of actual and perceived risks. So we, through those projects, Jim has really been able to work across a wide spectrum of people here at LSU and at other universities. And then finally, that last down there, the Super Mike grant that you see down there at the very bottom in black is really to help push our ability to, let's say, increase the tools, increase the ability of our tools to solve these computationally challenging problems. So, just kind of get quickly into some of the stuff Jim's done, and hopefully this will make sense if I explain it. But the idea of this simulation is really, and hopefully you can see my cursor there, but at the top there you see this web-based user interface. So the idea is to have an interface that is accessible by consultants or agency people so that they can use and take advantage of high-performance computing and observation data, so different models without really having to know a lot of details about how do you run a computer on a high performance, how do you run a simulation on a high performance computer, or how do I make sure that this particular observed data is in the right format for me to compare to my simulation data. So what you see here really is this web-based user interface at the top. And then what Jim and his team have really been doing in collaboration with computer scientists and really web experts at LSU and other places is to develop these, or to build these layers that allow the user, the client, to not worry about what you see down here at the bottom with the high performance computing and the cloud services. I don't know about you guys, but I have no idea how the cloud works, right? But the ability to take advantage of the cloud in terms of data storage, or to do computations is really amazing. And I don't have the time to figure that out, but there are smart people that do. And so really what Jim and his team are doing is developing this interface, this simulation, which allows people to use different models. And some of these you've heard of, I'm sure, like Delft 3D, AdCert, Swan. CA FunWave is actually, I think, a locally developed, or I say locally, LSU developed series of software or software package. So, and what Jim put together here is really, a cartoon or figure that talks about how you can really use this for collaboration, or enabling. Let me see if I can't. I hate to do that. I'm afraid to get rid of that slide, or that little bubble up there, because I'm afraid I'll shut down the whole talk. But what this shows really is how you're able to use simulation to look at, to not just to integrate or collaborate with other entities. In this case, he's talking about some work that the Water Institute, UNO, and UL are doing in terms of the Mississippi River, but also the data processing, the visualization, and use of observation data. So that's really the idea of simulation, and you can find that on the web. One of the things Jim's really been interested in doing is we understand that, storm surge and coastal process, understanding that the hydrodynamics in the coastal zone is important, but we really have to make sure that we're driving those coastal circulation zones or surge models with the appropriate wind models or wind predictions or projections, but that we're also able to then add the waves on top of that. So what Jim's been able to do is really work on linking, or developing improved wind models that will then drive the circulation models, whether it's a Delft 3D or an AdCert, but then also linking that to the wave models so that you can then get some ideas of what the wave heights or significant wave heights are going to be under particular circulation or hydrodynamic conditions, And obviously, you still have wind that's driving these waves also. So Jim's been working on that, and you know, he's linked the AdCirc and the Swan. So the AdCirc does the surge, while the Swan actually gives you the waves. So not only do you get this surge, which is going to, you know, increase the water depths and the stresses on some of our coastal structures, but now you're able to, you know, look at what the significant wave heights are going to be in your design. And then also, as I pointed out earlier, Jim's also worked on improving the wind field. So a lot of this is then based upon improving the physics or the integration or the taking the physics from the wind and, you know, the wind community or the atmospheric community and making sure those get translated into the stressors or the forcings for our surge models. Jim's also done a lot of work, and Scott's also doing a lot of work now with the SARA system, which is run primarily out of the Louisiana Sea Grant through some collaborations again with Sea Grant, and then I think the Northern Gulf Coast through the I think it's maybe a NOAA project, and I know there's collaborations through a Department of Homeland Security grant that's run out of the University of North Carolina. So if you're interested, or maybe a lot of you may have already looked at this in the past week or so, Sarah was doing some forecasts for the coast of Louisiana, and I know that I saw some emails flying around just a couple of days ago once Harvey kind of got back offshore and then decided to come back up through southwest Louisiana. I know there were a lot of hits in Sarah in terms of what the forecast surge heights were. So Jim and Jimmy and Scott, as a matter of fact, have both been working with that group. And I'm going to kind of scroll through some of this, but what Jim really kind of put out was a couple of things in terms of the, you know, ability to, you know, more and more to use these high performance computers, just because the systems are so complex, the computational needs are so high, and really the expectations of the user community are getting high, and we really need to be able to get a lot of these codes and simulations running on the high performance computers. And then Jim's done a good bit of work on terms of, you know, again, most people listening to this understand that the Saffir-Simpson scale is not really a good indicator of really what the risk or the damage is going to be. Jim's also done a good bit of work, and it's really kind of cool in terms of the integration between wetlands and coastal processes and surge. And what he's really pointing out here is in the upper right-hand corner, you see a large Delft 3D model domain. So he's got the river, he's got a good bit of kind of the Breton Sound area, and then and that really kind of drives the large-scale processes. But then this pink outline here is looking at a higher resolution or telescopic mesh, and then it's shown here in the larger part, where you can actually look at the different types of marsh that's in there and use then the simulations as well as the characteristics of these different marsh habitats or these different marsh types on surge and waves within that particular region. So he's done, you know, some simulations. Again, just one example of a modern model. These are maximum surges using Delft 3D within that region. You know, looking at, you know, how the different habitats or marsh types impact surge and waves. And he's got some conclusions here that, you know, looking at the surge reduction by vegetation and the biomechanical properties as well as the hurricane characteristics. So again, understanding the difference between a weak, fast-moving storm versus a strong or slow-moving, and also then what coastal infrastructure is in there, and really start looking at these natural or you know, nature-based features and what impact they have on surge and waves. The other thing that Jim's done, and it's something that's really been, I think, a value to CPRA and a lot of our coastal community, particularly, is in terms of shoreline erosion. And a lot of that is wave driven, and, you know, understanding kind of the orientation of the shoreline, what the typical winds are you know, in that region, what the fetch is, what are the significant wave heights in those regions, as well as what the water levels are. You know, Jim's been able to really move us forward in our kind of state of practice in terms of not just understanding the shoreline, but really how do you design shore protection or shoreline erosion protection strategies. So he's done, you know, some work obviously with just understanding what the shoreline change is, but then really looking at, you know, kind of the features, right? The effectiveness, the features or the hydrodynamics, but then the effectiveness of different protection structures. So, and you can look there at the kind of last second bullet there, and the idea of looking at these living shoreline structures, and really kind of thinking about where you need to put those in the water column and how much impact they'll have on attenuating waves. So Jim's done a lot of work on that, and it's actually something that when I was at the Water Institute of the Gulf running the Coastal Impact Innovation Assessment Program, one of the questions we had with some of these shoreline or nature-based shoreline structures was really thinking about what design, how effective are they, and under what conditions. And I think Jim and a lot of others, I know Tyler and a lot of other people have been working on that over time. So that's something we've really needed. So the third part of this talk is about the Center for River Studies, and I have to thank Rudy Simino at the Coastal Protection and Restoration Authority. He and I, over the last, we've probably known each other for 15 or more years, but he's the project manager for CPRA in terms of the Center for River Studies, and I'm the director of the Center for River Studies. So Rudy and I have been back and forth in terms of slides and what we like, how we present this. So some of these slides are going to be stuff that Rudy put together, some are what I put together. But hopefully, what you see here and what I want to point out here is and what I'm even highlighting in this slide is really kind of the collaboration between the Coastal Protection and Restoration Authority and LSU in terms of the Center for River Studies. And so those, just to orient you on here, what you're looking at is actually on the Baton Rouge Water Campus, and I'll show you a picture here in a second. But the big rectangular building that has the LSU logo over it is the Center for River Studies, and then the building over here, the 4-story building right next to it, is the CPRA building. So we're co-located. There's probably about 25 feet between the two buildings when located on the water campus. So what I want to do is just to walk you through a little bit of the Center for River Studies and what we're doing here within the river side. And I don't want to spend a lot of time going back, but for those of you who have been out to our former or our old river model lab, the right-hand side here, you can barely see it, I think, but I'm circling with my cursor, is the old existing Vincent Fort River and Coastal Hydraulics Lab, located just north on the vet school off of River Road. And we ran that model. We had a model in there for about 8 years that we used to qualitatively look at kind of the river and its and really what impact sediment diversions, large-scale, medium and large-scale sediment diversions would have on the river hydraulics, deposition, erosion patterns within the river, and get some idea of how much sediment we might be able to divert into our coastal wetlands. Well, the model got old. It was kind of reached its shelf life, and so CPRA undertook a study. And so on the left-hand side here, what they basically asked their consultants and science board was to say, do they just build another model that's about the same size? So what you see here in red that I'm boxing is the outline of what the old model covered. So it didn't even cover up to New Orleans. It covered about the lower 75 miles of the Mississippi River. And they basically said, should we just rebuild that? Then the second part was in yellow. Should we build a larger model that we might be able to fit in the building if we rotated? Or should they kind of go for the holy grail, which would be a model that would cover much more of the river, potentially up to Donaldsonville, and really allow for us to study a larger section of the river and really look at more of the kind of trade-offs along not just the lowermost part of the river, but really, let's say, the lower 170 miles. So CPRA, took the advice of the consultants and went after them and secured some funding to get this large scale, this larger system. And the second part of all this, while all this was happening, was got tasked or got asked to put this model or this new facility on the Baton Rouge Water Campus. And I'm not going to spend a bunch of time on this, but this diagram is Baton Rouge Area Foundation's kind of vision for the water campus. And again, what I want to point out here, where the cursor circling is where CPRA is currently located. The cursor I'm circling here, where you see the LSU logo, is where the Water Institute is. Where LSU Center for River Studies is. And then out here over the on the other side of the levee, where I'm kind of moving my cursor horizontally, is where the Water Institute of the Gulf is. So the three entities, CPRA, LSU, and the Water Institute of the Gulf, are all either physically present now or will be present within the next 4 or 5 months on the Baton Rouge Water Campus, within the idea of, Baton Rouge Area Foundation's vision is to then to have some commercial property as well as some maybe mixed use and some retail. So with that, we're located, so the Center for River Studies is actually now located and the construction's finished, and I'll talk about that on the Baton Rouge Water Campus. So there's a rendering, and I'll come back to that in a second, but that's a rendering of the Center for River Studies. You've already seen the actual picture, so I don't need to go through that. Just quickly, what I want to do is go through kind of the 3 areas of the Center for River Studies. We've got the exhibit outreach space, and I'll show you a couple pictures of that. It's about 9,000 to 10,000 square feet of really interesting and really compelling outreach and education materials that really get people to understand the river, the basin, the economic importance of the river, and then kind of what the impact of our management and engineering decisions have had on coastal Louisiana, then leading to, what is it we're trying to do? What is the state trying to do in terms of the master plan and different restoration projects, obviously including sediment diversions, as well as kind of a, hey, you want to be a coastal engineer or coastal science, a scientist? What kind of jobs are out there for people for students on, middle school and high school students who are interested in that? The middle area, and I'll show you a picture in a second, is where the physical model is going to be. And then we've got about another 9,000 feet in the back for a laboratory space as well as some office space. Here's an interior rendering of what about 5 years ago this was put together in terms of what the physical model space would look like. Believe it or not, it's pretty darn close to that. I think my next slide, I have a slide later on I'll show you, but it looks pretty close to that. The only thing I'm going to say right now is that the model itself is not going to be painted this color, but I'll get into how we're going to provide some geographic and visual color or features to the model. So this is what really the plan was, is to have a catwalk around this physical model so people could not just, learn more about the river and kind of what we're doing, but also kind of see the scale and the scope of some of the different projects, as well as the river and what we're trying to do. The exhibit outreach, this is just an initial earlier rendering of what the exhibit outreach space is going to look like. Again, multiple levels in terms of really nice, compelling visuals to very detailed information that'll be on these shelves, to really deep dive information on these tables in terms of things like numerical modeling, the CREMs, the coastwide coast reference monitoring stations, how they work, what kind of data they collect, how do you access them. And then the other part that's really, I think, neat about this space is this wall here that I'm circling is going to be a map of southern Louisiana, and it's going to show the projects that CPRA is either currently planning, in active planning or design of, or that are in construction or that have been constructed. So it'll give people a feel that, hey, we're not just continuing to study, but there's a lot of work going on in the coastal region in terms of construction and design of projects. So a little bit about the physical model is that the old model is in the kind of the details are in red. The new one is in green. So while we covered Myrtle Grove, which is around that Mid-Barataria region to the Gulf of Mexico previously, we're now up to Donaldsonville to the Gulf. Importantly, what I want to point out is down below the geometric scale information. We've vastly improved the scaling over what the old model did. So we're still not quantitative in terms of a lot of the processes within the river, but I think we're definitely more semi-quantitative than we used to be, and I think a lot of the information and data we're going to pull out of the model it'll be much more useful in terms of that third leg, what I call the third leg of our kind of river observation or field collection projects, the numerical modeling that's being done for the river, and then the physical modeling is that third leg. So I really think that the new model scale is really going to help us. Again, I don't want to get into a lot of these details. I just want to point out there's a huge number of data sets that have been used to create this physical model. This is a picture we love to show just because If you notice down here in the bottom left-hand corner, in different places, you kind of see this A18, A17, or G18, G17. Each one of those rectangles on this plot represents one 5 by 10 foot panel that was routed and created, and then eventually all put together to form this entire physical model domain. Each color on this figure represents a different data set that was used. So the data sets go everything from LIDAR to NOAA bathymetric data to U.S. Army Corps of Engineers topographic and bathymetric data, as well as other data sources. So a huge number of data sources were collected, QA/QC'd, and then basically, once they were taken, this is a 14,000 square mile domain at the actual prototype or real world scale. And then what we basically did was scaled that down 1 to 6,000 in the horizontal scales, and then 1 to 400 in the vertical scales in order to create our physical model XYZ data set. And once we did that, then each one of those 5 by 10 foot sections was extracted, put into a CNC router. And so what you're looking at now is a time-lapse video of one section of the model, or one panel of the model being routed. Each panel the panels are high density foamed. They each weighs between 600 and about 1,000 pounds. And actually, this is actually the New Orleans, the Crescent part there that you see being routed. It takes the CNC router anywhere from 18 to 30 hours to route a panel. And a lot of the reason it takes that long is, number one, it's a high density foam. Number two, we want really high precision routing. And the reason we want highly precise routing is that 1 foot in the real world or 1.5 feet in the real world is represented by 1 millimeter on the model. So again, 1 millimeter, if you're off 1 millimeter in your routing, you're off equivalent of about 1.5 feet in the real world. So we really need to have this precise, routing that takes place, or to create the panels, and obviously high quality bathymetric topographic data set. This slide here just points out that we do a pre and post routing survey of the panels, and I think all the data has shown that roughly about 93% of all the panels have been routed within 1/4 millimeter of what they were supposed to be routed. So, and then 95% are within 0.5 millimeter. So, really, the team that put together this concept of the CNC routing, the high density panel, the high density foam, really did an incredible job putting this together and really making sure that our model is, represents the bathymetry and topography of the system. And then what we did, so while the building was being constructed and a lot of the panels were being routed, we went to, along with BC Brown Canam Ganuch, which is now Ardora Group, as well as Alden Laboratories, we built what we called the guinea pig model. So it was 7 panels that you see here of a section of the Mississippi River, basically from the reserve area down to just below the Inner Harbor Canal. And so we put that together in order to test things like the pumps, the water level sensors, and really start to get some idea of how the model is going to perform. And so this is just a time-lapse video. Fortunately, CPRA and Alden Labs loves time-lapse videos. So you can see them, building the guinea pig model. You can see the jacks that are underneath, and all these panels are sitting on top of steel beams. So you can see it from the raw panels that have been routed to then painting them white. And then we did in a series of tests. So once the guinea pig was built, you can see here, I've circled here with my cursor, the acoustic sensors that measure water levels. We've got pumps that inject water and sediment at different hydrographs. One big advantage of a physical model is that the compressed time that you're able to get. So 1 year in the Mississippi River can be replicated in roughly 60 to 90 minutes on the physical model. So we haven't quite nailed down exactly what that time scale is, but we know it's going to be roughly in the order of 60 to 90 minutes. So we'll be able to do a 1 year Mississippi River time in about an hour to an hour and 30 minutes. And so one of the tests we did was actually looking at the Bonnet Carré spillway. This is the spillway you see here. And we did a test of 2011 when the Bonnet-Carré Spillway was opened and compared erosion and deposition patterns as well as the amount of sand that was moved into the Bonnet-Carré Spillway area. We compared that to field work and numerical modeling work. And this just gives you a video of the injection system. So again, what we're doing is upstream at the model, it's kind of the head box, we're actually able to inject sediment and water in quantities that represent the amount of water and sand. And when I say sediment, I'm only talking about sand for our physical model, that represent the sediment and flow hydrographs at the upstream boundary. So that gives you some idea of the guinea pig model. What we've also been able to do then, what I have here's a couple pictures of the construction inside. So what you see here is what the exhibit outreach area is going to be. You see a couple the walls, the wallpaper that's going up in terms of what the kind of the big picture or the renderings will look like. Then the details will go on the desks, and then the kiosks or the tables will be here in the middle. So once the building was finished, then they had the process of putting together 216 panels. And understanding, again, or reminding you that 1 millimeter on the physical model is 1.5 feet in the real world, you can imagine the attention to detail that had to be taken to get this physical model put together and make sure that everything was level and precisely put together. So what you see here is a time-lapse video of about, I think it's about 40% of the model being put together. The model is 100% put together now, but right now we only have the time-lapse for the 40%. And you can imagine the challenge of basically having about over 200 panels in the model space and having to then find the ones you need and then start in one corner and move your way through, while at the same time making sure the panels are perfectly level, matched up, and that you don't have leakage and you have a good seam between the different panels. So you can see also that on the top, you can see the crane that moves back and forth. So we have a crane. There's a forklift that you can be, or scissor lift that you can get up and down and work on things in the crane or move panels around. Once the model was put together, like I said, 216 5 by 10 foot panels. All the seams were epoxied, and then they were also then epoxied between them and also on top. And then we had a painting crew come in about 3 days, painted the top of the model white with a high-end swimming pool paint that also will provide some leak-proof or help prevent some of the leaking. And so you can see here that the 216, you can kind of see each panel, and then you can see the crew here painting. And then this is actually a picture we did after the painting was complete, where we actually then just completely flooded the model to do a leak test. And so we just basically filled the model up over the course of over a day to check to see whether any of the seams leaked. I think there's roughly 3,500 linear feet of seams when you look at all 216 panels. And at least to date, knock on wood, none of those seams leaked within at least the first leak test. So we think we have the trial and error that we went through and the procedures developed with the guinea pig model seem to have worked out. So once the model then did the leak test, and once we then dried it off, basically then the next step was installing the acoustic gauges. So you can see now here, and my cursor is following those little stands along the river. So we're actually looking at, my cursor actually here at the top of the model is shows where the head box will be, and that's Donaldsonville. This is the New Orleans area, English Turn, where my cursor is here, and then moving down to Head of Passes down in this area. So each one of those stands, at least along the river, is located at a spot where the Corps of Engineers has a gauge out on the actual river. We have acoustic sensors at different locations to help us monitor and the Gulf of Mexico levels as we do tests. The other thing I want to point out here is at the top you see these boxes that are in bags. Those are 20 high-resolution projectors that will be able to project down onto the physical model, and I'll talk about that here in a second. And then there's also some other bags that are encompassing some cameras. Okay, so the digital projection system. What you're looking at here is an example in the guinea pig model. Ignore the dolphins and CPRA logo for a second, and if you just look up here at the top, what you see is one projector projecting down Google Earth images. I think they're two different images from, I think, about a decade apart. And what you can see is really the quality of the projection that these projectors can show, or the image that the projectors can show on the physical model surface. So you can see how they capture the levees, they capture the guide walls of the Bonnet-Carré spillway. They even allow you to look down, not necessarily at the houses, but you can see neighborhood features. You can obviously see Lake Pontchartrain. The reason we put the sharks in here, actually those are sharks, not dolphins. The company that's doing this did a lot of work with Discovery Channel for Shark Week, and they actually, this shows that we can also do animation and different videos. So we'll be able to show numerical model projections onto the physical model surface itself, as well as any other information, such as hurricane protection levees, the Mississippi River and tributaries projects, coastal land loss maps, etc. So the current status is the model's construction is complete. It's been we're currently getting ready to fill it up with water, calibration and validation. Exhibit area will be installed. Probably get the opening will be sometime in probably October or November. Future operations, LSU is going to own the building. We're going to staff, operate, maintain the model. CPRA is going to run the exhibit outreach space. And then basically have access for school groups, visiting scientists, and as well as public access. And we're going to put in the quiz, and the question marks there is because we're not quite sure how we're going to do the public access yet, just in terms of having to staff that and making sure that people, get a high quality visit through the exhibit outreach space as well as the physical model space. So with that, I want to wrap this up and basically say, hopefully you got some idea of what this new master's program is all about and what we're trying to do at LSU, and really some of the work that we're doing in terms of the coastal risk and resiliency, are really trying to move this natural and nature-based infrastructure to more into the design phase, and then really using the Center for River Studies to look at the Mississippi River and really how we balance out the needs for coastal restoration, the navigation, and make sure that the communities and industries along the river are safe from flood risk. So with that, I'm happy to take some questions. My contact information is at the bottom, as well as my cell number. So if you don't have time for questions now, or you're looking at this presentation a week or a month from now, there you see my contact information. I'm happy to chat, happy to take some questions right now if you have them.
All right, thank you, Dr. Willson. Go ahead and open it up for questions.
Hey, Clint, it's Tyler.
Hey, Tyler.
I, from time to time, get asked for ideas, primarily for master's theses. I was wondering if you had some thoughts on bite-sized projects in the Coastal Ecological Engineering program.
Yeah, definitely. I think it follows along, and you and I talked about this some, right? In terms of the, I think moving these products, to the, a better understanding, let's say, the wave attenuation characteristics, or the, what kind of, making sure people understand, within the design community, what the, what the wave attenuation properties are, and under what conditions are they most, effective. But I think on the other part is really looking at some maybe more quantitative features of the oyster reefs or some of these products in terms of the ecosystem services. And I think that's where I'm sure, as you've been asked that a lot, right? In terms of kind of what's the dollar amount that you can assign to this product over the, not just in terms of maybe an attenuation or a shoreline protection, but what other dollar amounts can you put onto that? Does that make sense, Tyler, what I'm saying?
Yeah. Coming from the perspective of people considering graduate school, they have a lot of questions and uncertainty, and so I usually say start with your professor and then take it from there, right? Typically, it has to complement what you're working on.
Yeah, but I typically, if a student doesn't have, I really encourage them to talk to people like you. And I don't know if they haven't, right? But I do that because a lot of times, what we want to do is be able to address a question or a need you have, while at the same time, using that as a thesis and kind of, maybe advancing some of the tools we have. I don't know if that makes, I want to keep doing that.
All right.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Dr. Woods, I do want to comment on the I guess the first two sections that you showed that is the real world application of the modeling that your department is doing.
Yeah.
Is it from an aspect of commercialization? Is LSU contacted to provide this real world modeling forecasting for commercial interests?
I don't know about I'm not sure about commercial interests. I do know that there's some connections with the state, with the GOSEP office, for example. I know that Sarah, the Coastal Emergency, I forget now what CERA. And sorry, I'm not good with acronyms. I know that is utilized a lot, and that there's some collaborations with the Stevenson Disaster Management Institute in terms of emergency planners and emergency response people. But as far as commercialization, I don't think at this point there has been a lot. And I'm assuming maybe you're asking in terms of like the insurance industry or the reinsurance industry.
Right. Just from a perspective of bringing it out of the academic arena and into use in the public arena, because obviously the work that you're doing is very from a user's perspective may be difficult, but from the actual application of it in the real world, it would have a lot of benefit to a lot of different organizations. Just trying to figure out how that connection works between LSU and getting the research that's being done and the actual using of the resources that you have to help people in the coastal communities.
Yeah, and so I know CPRA CPRA interacts with the surge, with this coastal modeling group, and I know one thing NOAA is really focused on ensuring that their research that they fund has direct impact with their community, and their community could be the scientists and engineers that work for NOAA, the people within their research reserves, right? Their National Estuarine Research Reserves. The Sea Grant program does a lot. As a matter of fact, I probably should have plugged them at the very beginning. A lot of this work is being used by Louisiana and even Mississippi, Alabama Sea Grant offices to really make sure that it gets out through the extension agents to the people on the ground. So yeah, I think a lot of it is being utilized, and there are a lot of interactions between the communities or the industries and what people like Scott and Jim are doing.
Very good. Do we have any other follow-up questions? All right, Charles, I'll let you take it away, and you close this out, Charles.
Thank you all very much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Dr. Wilson.
Of course. Well, and thank you for everybody for taking the time. It's a surreal time following the storm.
Yeah.
But what a blessing it is that we're able to gather, and I hope everyone on the call is safe.
Yep.
But again, this Hawaii coastal is so very important because we are immediately impacted by so many variables. Anyway, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today. Of course, this is recorded and archived, and we look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks.
Hey.
Thank you very much. You'll have a great day.